They're ready to win games. Like, they're ready to prove to people that this is the next step. And that next step is translating these offseason moves and draft picks into wins, and I think it will.
The NFL draft is over, and I think the Bears did well. And I know that the day after the NFL draft, it is both fun to break down, but also people want to push back, saying, how could you grade a draft class days after the players were just selected? We haven't seen them play in the NFL, but we do like talking football. So we welcome your calls at 312-332-3776. I'll say this. The one thing that I will take away from this draft class before we even see them play on the field, I feel as if Ryan Poles continues a smart, steady approach to this rebuild. It didn't seem like there were any flashy picks or reaches for the Chicago Bears. It felt as if they were taking advantage of the situation in the board in front of them. Mm-hmm. And I love the idea that the Bears, who were 31st last season in rushing yards given up per game defensively, they gave up 157 yards per game on the ground. They go and spend draft capital on 3 defensive linemen to try and bolster the middle of the defensive front for the Chicago Bears. Because the one thing that we've talked about is the way to get from bottom of the barrel to competing team, the easiest way to help this team in the future is solidifying the defensive line and stopping the gashing run game that the other teams are taking advantage of. We saw multiple times last season, Detroit, Dallas, Miami at times, where they were just running straight up the middle of the football field. Oh, yeah. And we saw Ryan Poles solidify and to address that issue this weekend in the draft. So to me, smart and steady approach from Ryan Poles. I appreciate what I saw this weekend from the Bears.
I can look at this draft by Ryan Poles and say that there should be, let's count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys that should be competing for starting spots by next season, right? Not necessarily this season. Like, I don't expect Tyler Scott to start at wide receiver. It's a very crowded wide receiver room, but you addressed needs that will come up next offseason. This team is getting younger. They were one of the oldest teams before Ryan Poles came in and started tearing it down. And we've said the tear down is much easier than building it back up. But I kind of like this measured 2-year approach, right? Like, after the draft, Ryan Poles even said, look, we didn't get a defensive end. He was peppered with questions about not getting a defensive end. The value wasn't there. I was surprised that he kind of sat out most of the second round and just sat until they got to 53. But when they got to 53, they got, Gervon Dexter is a good player and should be competing for a starting spot. Tyrique Stevenson should also be competing for a starting spot. Zacch Pickens, the same thing. And Rashawn Johnson and Tyler Scott, I think, 2 are the steals of the draft. You look at, it's easy to look at mock drafts the week after and be like, well, they were wrong. Sure. But you can look at grades, right? Not grades as in the Bears got an A, B, or C or whatever. But Tyler Scott and Rashawn Johnson both had second round grades and were drafted in the 4th round. That's value to me. This is a value draft. You addressed needs while at the same time you acknowledge the fact that we have 2 first-round picks next year, and not everything can be fixed in one 3-day draft. Like, this is going to be a process. And if you fix your offensive line, you fix the interior of the defensive line, and you add a stud running back who's cheap and cost-controlled for the next few years. Same with a wide receiver who could take the place of one of your wide receivers who's up for a contract at the end of this season. That, to me, is a valuable draft where you go in and you address certain needs and not just reach because, well, we need a defensive end, so we got to do it now. Well, we need a bunch of offensive linemen, so let's draft 10 offensive linemen. Like, that's not how you enter a draft when you're not ready to win. And I don't like this notion that the Bears aren't ready to win. They're not ready to win a Super Bowl. They might not be ready to win a playoff game, but they're ready to win more than 3 games. They're ready to win games. Like, they're ready to prove to people that this is the next step. And that next step is translating these offseason moves and draft picks into wins, and I think it will.
Well, and I think that's where, you look at this entire offseason approach, right? So a part of what Ryan Poles has kind of laid out there is this idea that he can't fix everything in one draft. You referenced it. He talked about it on Saturday. Here's Ryan Poles, the concern of maybe not finding defensive ends in this year's draft.
Yeah, I think I talked about that before. I think you want to fix everything immediately, but it's got to work the right way. The right players got to be there that fit our scheme. They want to be here. So we can't fix everything at a high level in one swoop. So we are aware of our strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to be opportunistic. That's why we've done what we've done, and we still have flexibility to do what we need to do to improve in different areas. And if that's the area that we improve moving forward, we do. If that doesn't opportunity doesn't open up, then we'll just continue to what we're doing. But there's also drafts next year, and we've set ourselves up nicely for that too.
So that was Ryan Poles over the weekend. That's basically the idea that you're pointing to that he talked about. I mean, look at it this way, right? Offensively, did he upgrade the offensive line so far in this offseason? Free agency in the draft? Mm-hmm. Yes, he did. Did he upgrade the weapons for Justin Fields in this offseason?
Absolutely.
Free agency in the draft? He did, right?
Yeah.
He trades for DJ Moore. He gets more draft capital for the future, but also he selects a wide receiver and a running back. Abdallah just mentioned both had second-round grades. The Bears get him in the 4th round. So he upgrades the offensive skill set, weaponry for Justin Fields. You go to the defensive side. Did he upgrade the defensive line?
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
In free agency or the draft?
The interior, yes. The interior of the defensive line, yeah.
The defensive line today is better than what it was at the start of the offseason.
They should be able to stop the run better than they did last year.
Right, and they were one of the worst in all of the National Football League. And part of the reason to why they only won 3 football games. Linebackers, did he upgrade the linebacker core in free agency and in the draft?
Yes.
He absolutely did, right?
Yeah.
And then we look to the secondary. Did he upgrade the secondary in the free agency period in the NFL draft?
Oh, yeah.
He did. So basically, Ryan Poles says on Saturday, I can't address every single part of the team, all of the holes that we have. Mm-hmm. But what he has done here in this offseason is improved each and every portion of this team except for defensive end. It's the only one.
Yeah.
Which he could still spend money and find someone like a Frank Clark or a Ngakoue to come in here as a free agent who has not signed yet to add to that. That to me is really impressive. It's rare that we see a GM in this town go out and address almost every facet of the team and to at least try and improve it a little bit. Can he fix everything in this offseason? No, he can't. Can he improve it enough to now we're at the point where this team is not sitting at 3 wins, but really we're looking at a team that's fighting for 6, 7, 8. And then hopefully 2 years from now, we can say this is a team that's one piece away from competing for a Super Bowl, because that's the path they're on. They are no longer in the basement. This is now we are building up, and now we are trying to win football games. Will they win them all? No, that's not what this next season is. Will they be competitive? Yeah, because at
they were
times
competitive last year.
Exactly. The problem was, why were they not competitive? The defense was so bad that they let down the quarterback and the offense. The quarterback kept them in games last year. So now you upgrade all these other positions, including the offensive line. I expect the quarterback to be a little better. And then you see everything else. Theoretically, the pieces are in place to move forward.
And I think when you look at this and the way they're set up, they got difference makers, right? The difference is you're going to see, like, as much as fans were upset when Montgomery was let go, they're probably going to be as upset when Rashawn Johnson leaves, right? Like, because that's how you do. Our exact comments: draft a running back in the 4th round. What do? They drafted a running back in the 4th round. We said get a wide receiver. Now, you and I were both saying, go out and get Jackson Smith and Jigba, but they moved down and wanted to get a tackle that is someone who could be there for the next 10 years. If Darnell Wright it's not the pick that I would have made. I'm not Ryan Poles. It's not the pick that I would have made. But if Darnell Wright is the offensive lineman that they believe, and he's going to be there, and you don't have to worry about that position for a decade, then it's a great pick, right? Like, that's what you hope to get from this, and that's what I feel like they did. All the times we talked about when Justin Fields didn't have time to throw the football. Where was the pressure coming from? Mostly the interior of the offensive line.
Right.
And so if you can do the opposite to teams, if they believe that they can generate pressure with a rotation of guys in the interior of the defensive line, and that's the way they get to the quarterback for now, then fine. The number one goal, I said this before the draft, I will continue to say it until we get to the season. The number one goal for the end of the 2023-24 season is to find out whether or not Justin Fields is the guy. And they set him up to not have any excuses now. You wanted a number one wide receiver? DJ Moore is here. You wanted another speedy, fast guy? You got Tyler Scott here now. So you wanted a good running back replacement for Montgomery? You got a good running back replacement for Montgomery. You got a couple of them. You got a couple replacements for Montgomery.
Sure.
So now you've set yourself up to, at the end of the season, of this coming season, to say, all right, Justin Fields is the guy. We have 2 first-round picks. We don't need to use them to trade up for a quarterback. Let's use them for a top defensive end. Let's use 2 of them. Get 2 top defensive ends in the first round. Maybe you draft another offensive lineman in the first round. Maybe you draft a wide receiver, because we're going to get calls for the entire year about Marvin Harrison Jr. And if you want him, you're going to have to be in the top 2 picks. I'm telling you right now, for Marvin Harrison Jr., most likely. Top 2 or 3 picks. And I'm hoping the Bears are not there. Like, the hope is that they're picking around 15, 16, 17 because they had an 8 or 9 win season.
The hope is that Carolina is there.
Yes.
And you use that Carolina pick
Absolutely.
on a player like Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, and because of that, now this is a season where you can look at it and say, look, if they lose games 27-24 and Justin Fields has 3 touchdowns each game, and he's averaging, they're putting up 24 points a game, and he's averaging 3 touchdowns a game, whether it's 2 through the air, 1 on the ground, whatever it is, however they're scoring, then fine. That's great. I don't care, because I want to see Justin Fields progress. If they only end up winning 5 games and I'm wrong, and it's because of the defense keeps giving things up and they need to keep on adding to the defense in the draft, then fine. That's what they do. The number one priority this year is still Justin Fields. And in this draft, and in the offseason as a total now that we're basically to the end of the offseason, besides some, post-June 1st cuts, so maybe they add a defensive end there. This is a team that should be competing with their offense now and some of the defense. The defenses still need some work, but now you've set Justin Fields up for success.